So the first test is going to be adding a snake game to the 404 page. When a user hits this page, maybe it's offline or they've directed themselves to somewhere that doesn't exist. You want to have a little snake game that pops up. Hopefully, they're not too upset about it not being available. The second test is going to be adding a pricing card. So the pricing right now, there's only one price that's available, but adding in a second tier here that's for like enterprise level agency type customers is going to be good because then you can charge more based on the limits that they want or maybe some additional security things. And the third test here is going to be updating a component. And when this component was initially designed, I did have 5 steps in mind for the like backend process that users go through, but I'm just going to have them do 3 steps instead. So importing a YouTube URL, generating some new content, then exporting it out. And for the last piece here, the last test case is going to be creating a refactor plan to add OpenAI as a provider. And that leads right into the architecture for this. In this architecture, what we have is a React front end here. We kind of went through that. There's a separate landing page and then a dashboard. But then on the back end, when the users are generating content, it hits this agent, and then the agent chooses to create content using some functions. Right now, there's only one function, and it goes out to this Bedrock runtime. The Bedrock runtime is then responsible for actually generating content. Given that GPT-4o is significantly cheaper, it may make more sense if I have a large volume of jobs to send it off to GPT-4o Mini to do that processing. Granted, maybe I don't want the degradation of the quality of the outputs, but for this, we're just keeping it practical. We're not really worried about the quality of the outputs just yet. I think that can come down the line. All right, so to recap, we're going to make edits in 2 places, is the front end part of it, and then we're going to create a refactor plan for this back end half. All right, let's get into the first test. The prompt I'm going to use for test number 1 is in the front end. This is what I like about Cursor, this AI editor, is I can directly reference like a directory, a file, a little code snippet, so it makes it very easy to write these prompts. And actually, I'm going to even be more specific. I'm going to say in the landing folder, add a not found page that is hit when the user navigates to a path that does not exist. Maybe that's a little bit verbose, but I kind of want to be specific. And I want to tell it to update a couple files because I kind of know which files it needs to update. So update app.tsx, which is where I'm doing my routing right now, and any update app.txs, and I'll say add component. Oh, let's make sure that's a landing page component. Landing component, add component, and what else do you want? Let's say add a page as well. So, and make sure we're adding a page in the landing. All right, so I think that's a pretty good prompt. I'm not going to do it one shot, like just update the code base, but I actually wanted to be very specific and give it a fair shot here. So let's see what it gives back. And we'll look at the speed as well. And the good thing about Cursor is it'll look at the entire code base and then give you a response. So it'll put the entire code base into context. You can see that right here, that the entire code base is there. All right, so let's read the response. To add a not found page to your React application, follow these steps. Create a not found component in the component sector directory. Makes sense. Create a not found page in the pages directory. Makes sense. Update the app.txs to include the new route. Create the not found component. So it gives us the code snippet to do this. And then it gives us a little bit of code snippet here. And then it gives us code snippet here. So that's kind of like the first part. Now we have the not found page. Let me add in a follow-up question. And I'm going to say, add a snake game to the not found component the user can play when they hit the page. See how that does. All right, and so it just starts with creating the snake game component as well. And Yeah, this looks generally right. I mean, from what I've seen about from other Snake game, adds in some CSS as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and follow these steps and see what we get back. I have gone through and implemented all the steps that GPT-4o Mini gave me, and you'll see here that I've added in a Snake game component, and then I've also added a not found page. Then I updated my routing for the app to go to a not found page whenever someone goes to like a path that's not included. So this is all pretty standard out of the box stuff, and I think it makes sense to me. So let's actually test it out and see whether or not it kind of passes it on the first go. All right, let's go to the front end and we'll hit a random URL here and let's see what happens. Okay, so we have the 404 page. We have not found. We do have some type of game here, but I am not sure what's going on. It's kind of bouncing all over the place. Let's see if we can fix it. So I'm going to give it one chance to fix it. And let's say at Snake Game is defective. So let's just say it's defective. Fix it. So, okay, let's do that. Okay, so it says here's a revised version of the Snake game component with improvements to ensure the game functions correctly, including handling game over conditions and preventing the snake from moving in the opposite direction. So it seems like it thinks that's the problem. So let's go over to the component and make that update. So if I hit this, actually cursor right here, if you just hit the file name, quick tip, it'll bring you to the file, then you can hit apply and it'll show you all the updates it's going to make, and then you can just hit accept. And so that'll make the updates right there in the browser. And we should see in real time the changes being made. So still not able to play the game. So I'm going to call this one a fail. I mean, it's pretty easy to do. Maybe I layer on too many things, but I think for these purposes, I'm going to say this one's pretty much a fail here. Preview, so that's going to be a fail on that one. All right, the next one might be a bit easier, and I'll do this one live because it shouldn't involve creating a bunch of new files. We're going to add in additional pricing card for agency owners to contact us about special pricing. Okay, so let's actually start a new chat, and I'm say in the front end. Actually, again, you can just say the landing page because that's more specific. So I'm giving it a lot of context, so that's pretty surprising that it failed that last one. In the landing, add a new pricing card or the pricing card for a let's say agency owner tier. Agency owner tier. Mimic the other pricing card. So I'm kind of going based off of what I've been using, like doing with Claude 3.5 Sonnet. I actually don't need to give it much instruction. It usually kind of just works. And let's see how this will do here. Here's the response. To add a new pricing card for an agency owner tier in the pricing table component, you can follow the structure of the existing pricing tier component. Here's how you can do it. So it takes us straight to the page. I'm just going to go ahead and click apply. This looks about right. So let's hit accept. And then we're going to preview the page real quick. Okay, this looks pretty good. It added a new card. It has the right title. It even updated the copy for me. So it went from 100 to 500. It went from 30 to 100 here. And it even made the card a little bit bigger compared to the card to the left of it. The other thing I would change in the prompt originally is let's make this one recommended and let's make this one the highlighted plan. Moving on to test number 3 here, we're going to update our timeline component. And I think this one should be easy as well because the components are really well structured and it shouldn't take too much to just simply remove these 2 steps. But you never know. I thought we were going to pass a Snake game test and we failed that one. So let's give it a try. Let me write the prompt for this. So in landing, we're going to follow pretty much the same step. It's update the timeline by removing step 1 and step 2. Update the numbers 1 through 3. All right, to update process timeline, so it picked up the actual component, which is cool. Component and timeline, it picked up the file as well. So let me head over to the file, and then let me look at what it's doing here. So it seems like it is just catching that there's a repeated little timeline snippet here, and it's just catching that that needs to be updated. So this is another small little change. Let's do that. Accept it. And then let's go back to the browser to see what happened. Again, a simple change, did it pretty well. No hallucinations that look crazy. I would call this one another quick pass on this one. So it seems like GPT-4o Mini, when it comes to coding, if it's a fairly simple task that touches like a file or two, it might do well. Once you start getting into multiple files and multiple types of updates, even if you split it up, it might not understand how to make those changes accurately, or it might just need more iterations to get it correct. For the final test here, we are simply going to create a refactor plan. We're not going to actually code anything out. What I'm really trying to get at is the reasoning behind why it might make some of these actions, and seeing if this was a scenario where I asked the model to make all these updates to a code base and it just came back as a pull request that I just had to accept, would it kind of pass or would it not pass that? So let's go ahead and plan out this prompt. I'll say refactor code base so users can choose which models they want to leverage for code generation. And I'm going to be even more specific about what it should update. So I kind of know my code base, so you can kind of ignore this part, but I would say when you're doing prompting, the more specific you are, the better it's going to be. So I'll say in the content agent, update the secondary adapter to use OpenAI. OpenAI node. So I indexed the OpenAI documentation earlier so I can reference it here. Not even a documentation. I just took their whole GitHub repository and indexed it. And update the, let's say, okay, I said secondary adapter. Update the use case to call. Actually, let's leave it like that. Let's say update the secondary adapter. And what I'll do, I'll say update metadata. Metadata. There we go. Metadata to reflect the choice of model between Claude 3 and GPT-4. Make the same updates on the front end, right? And so we're not going to actually implement this. I just want to see how it kind of plans this out, and would it be enough on the front end. Let's see what it says. To refactor the code base to allow users to choose between models for code generation. Did I say code generation? I meant content generation. So let's change that. Content generation. That's good. Sometimes it repeats it back to you and you can catch your mistakes. All right. So to refactor the code base to allow users to choose between models for content generation, we will make updates in the content agent metadata and front-end sections. Okay, so it says update the content agent secondary adapter. Okay, this is pretty cool. It caught that it needed to import OpenAI, assuming I did like the yarn install and all that stuff. So let's just make this a bit smaller. You go to the file here. And so in this file, that's where it would add in this adapter. Make these updates to the adapter. So let's look at this function. Const generates content. I have a command here, and then it says which model it should be using. And it's kind of copying what I do for Amazon Bedrock, which is not accurate because Amazon Bedrock has a different API. So this actually wouldn't work. It's this is a good catch. If I was reviewing this wouldn't work. But it does update the metadata correctly, and it does update what's passed in the metadata to the actual use case from the agent. Okay. And it does make some updates to the front end. So it has like the little form here. Okay, you know what? This isn't bad. It would get me most of the way there. And even in like our repurpose page here that's used on in the back end on the dashboard, it does update the API call to include the model as well. So I would say this is like a partial pass. I would expect it to catch that not to do this incorrectly. I did give it the entire OpenAI SDK for Node, so it should have maybe just generated that content. But overall, I could update that myself and just add that code in. But for the purposes of this series of tests, I'm going to say that is unfortunately a fail because this is a pretty big part of it. Probably the most important part right here. Overall, it seems like GPT-4o Mini is good at small code changes and making updates here and there. It can also really summarize an entire code base well. But just to recap the test we went through, it failed to actually implement the snake game at the end there. It did work on adding a pricing card and also updating another component that was like a timeline component. But it then failed on creating a refactor plan that I would accept from like a pull request. So when it involves touching like multiple files or reasoning about the entire code base, it seems like it would struggle just a little bit. GPT-4o Mini could be used to maybe craft that first plan if it's going to be expensive, and then you have like another model come in, implement it, or like re-evaluate the plan and see if there's any opportunities to make updates. The actual point of GPT-4o Mini is that cost reduction, so I can't really fault it for not being extremely good at coding. A quote from OpenAI here covers this. They say, over the past few years, we witnessed remarkable advancements in AI intelligence paired with substantial reductions in cost. For example, the cost per token of GPT-4o Mini has dropped by 99% since Text DaVinci 003. That is like a throwback. A less capable model introduced in 2022. OpenAI is being cryptic about this, but what they're hinting at is LLM inference cost is essentially going to go to zero at some point. If you think about how cell phone plans used to work, you had to negotiate with the cell phone providers around how many minutes you were going to get on your individual plans. Then eventually it went into you getting nights and weekends as some type of promotion. And eventually, now if someone's telling you you're not getting unlimited minutes on your plan, you're almost like, well, that's kind of weird. So I think the same thing's going to happen with these LLMs as APIs. The inference cost is just going to go to zero. Also, the techniques for training and deploying these models are getting better. Also, that's going to reduce the cost over the next couple of years. So I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see a zero cost LLM over an API from one of the major providers in the next couple of maybe months or even like a year or two. The second observation here is that you're going to start seeing a lot more people implement some type of like routing agent where you're going to want to use the best model for the job. So the agent is not only going to route functions and route calls to APIs, it'll actually do some type of calculation to say, all right, which model should I be using for this at this point in time? So if it's maybe like a marketing use case, it might use Claude 3.5 to do like a good marketing page, right? Good marketing copy. If it needs to summarize a large chunk of files and output like a long newsletter, it might then move it to GPT-4o Mini. So I could see this being a technique that you as someone who's developing agents would have to learn this technique of having the agent route to different models when needed and making sure that costs were controlled in that way. So overall, I like GPT-4 Mini. I think for the purpose it was built, it accomplishes that. It reduces costs by a significant amount, which is a good thing for startups. It's a good thing for businesses using this. It kind of takes away that objection when it's like, oh, AI is just too expensive sometimes. So it helps with that objection. And I want to know, what has been your use cases with GPT-4 Mini so far? Have you implemented it in anything? Are you finding that it's good at certain things, it's bad at certain things. Do you completely disagree with these tests that I've run? And you have a whole new suite of tests that I should actually be running. I'd be happy to hear it.